In the early morning hours of December 6, 2024, a 26-year-old man named Luigi Mangione stepped from the shadows on New York's 6th Avenue and gunned down Brian Thompson, the 50-year-old CEO of United Healthcare, in what would become one of the most polarizing assassinations in recent American history. What followed was not the universal condemnation one might expect for such a brazen act of violence, but rather something far more unsettling. The transformation of an alleged killer into a folk hero, complete with musical tributes, religious iconography, and merchandise proclaiming Luigi the man, the myth, the legend. The speed with which Mangione's story has been mythologized is breathtaking. Just 9 months after the shooting, Luigi the musical debuted at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, having first been performed in a 50-seat San Francisco venue, where a local arts journalist praised the actor playing Mangione as oozing Italian charm and sex appeal. The show depicts Mangione sharing a prison cell with crypto fraudster Sam Bankman-Fried and Sean P. Diddy Combs, turning alleged criminality into entertainment. When interviewed after the performance, young audience members expressed genuine support for Mangione's actions, with one stating, "I think a lot of people support him, and what better way to honor him and what's happening by putting it into a musical." This reaction reflects a troubling generational divide in American attitudes toward violence as a tool for social change. Polling conducted after Mangione's arrest revealed that while Americans overall split 2-1 against him, the demographics told a different story. Over 40% of 18 to 29-year-olds described his alleged actions as acceptable, and nearly half of college students believed the killing was justified. Only among Americans over 65 was there overwhelming condemnation of the murder. Perhaps most remarkably, this sympathy has extended beyond American borders, with young people in other countries expressing empathy for Mangione's cause despite never having experienced the American healthcare system firsthand. The merchandise ecosystem that has sprung up around Mangione despite attempts by major retailers to shut it down speaks to the depth of his cultural penetration. T-shirts bearing his face with slogans like, "But Daddy, I love him," have become ubiquitous, while his mugshot has been transformed into religious imagery complete with halo and robes, literally sanctifying the alleged assassin. A mural of Mangione has appeared in London's Bethnal Green, demonstrating how his story has transcended national boundaries to become a symbol of resistance against perceived corporate oppression. At the heart of Mangione's appeal lies America's dysfunctional healthcare system, a labyrinthine structure that has left millions of Americans feeling victimized by the very institutions meant to protect them. Mangione himself had suffered for 18 months from spondylolisthesis, a debilitating spinal condition that eventually required lumbar fusion surgery costing between $50,000 and $150,000. His experience navigating the insurance system, having to exaggerate symptoms to qualify for coverage, battling with companies that maximize profits by delaying or denying claims, mirrors the struggles of countless Americans who find themselves fighting for their lives against both disease and corporate bureaucracy. The manifesto found on Mangione when he was arrested in Altoona, Pennsylvania, was neither the rambling of a conspiracy theorist nor the product of fringe ideology. His 262-word document contained accurate statistics and cited mainstream critics of the American healthcare system, including filmmaker Michael Moore and physician-journalist Dr. Elisabeth Rosenthal. "Frankly, these parasites simply had it coming," Mangione wrote. "The U.S. has the #1 most expensive healthcare system, yet we rank roughly number 42 in life expectancy. United is the largest company in the U.S. by market cap behind only Apple, Google, Walmart. Insurers have simply gotten too powerful, and they continue to abuse our country for immense profit because the American public has allowed them to get away with it." These weren't fringe arguments. A Gallup poll from November 2023 showed 70% of Americans agreeing that the healthcare system was either in crisis or suffering from major problems. Another survey revealed that only 25% of Americans held a favorable view of insurance companies. Mangione's critique, however extreme his proposed solution, tapped into genuine and widespread frustration with a system that routinely prioritizes profit over patient care. What makes Mangione's case particularly chilling is how it represents a twisted evolution of American violence. The shell casings from his gun were inscribed with the words delay, deny, and depose, a reference to the insurance industry's alleged strategy of delay, deny, defend when handling claims. This wasn't random violence but calculated symbolic action, designed to send a message about corporate accountability through the barrel of a gun. As Mangione wrote in his notes, many have illuminated the corruption and greed decades ago, and the problems simply remain. It is not an issue of awareness at this point, but clearly power games at play. Evidently, I am the first to face it with such brutal honesty. The victim in all of this, Brian Thompson, has been largely erased from the narrative surrounding his own murder. While he earned $10 million in 2023 as CEO of United Healthcare, he was also a husband and father of two, who had previously led government health programs and was remembered by those who knew him as an amiable man. Thompson wasn't a war criminal or corrupt dictator, yet he has been denied the basic empathy typically extended to murder victims, reduced instead to a symbol of corporate greed deserving of execution. This dehumanization of victims reflects a dangerous trend in American political discourse, where individuals become mere representatives of larger systems deemed worthy of violent resistance. The romantic appeal of the social bandit, a concept explored by historian Eric Hobsbawm in his studies of figures like Robin Hood, Jesse James, and Pancho Villa, has found new expression in the digital age, where viral fame can transform alleged killers into folk heroes overnight. Progressive writer Sarah Jaffe, examining Mangione's appeal in the Progressive magazine, argued that he was admired because he was effective. She wrote, "The usual response, American style, might have been to shoot up a call center. But the successful precision targeting of a CEO seems to have struck a chord because, well, it worked." This chilling assessment treats assassination as a viable form of activism, suggesting that targeted violence against specific individuals is somehow more admirable than random mass shootings. But the question of whether Mangione's actions worked remains unanswered and deeply problematic. Did the shooting lead to meaningful healthcare reform? Did it cause insurance companies to dramatically alter their policies? Or did it simply add another layer of tragedy to an already broken system, while potentially inspiring copycat attacks? Jaffe herself seems to anticipate this darker possibility, noting that school shootings, after all, didn't immediately proliferate, but have increased steadily in the years after Columbine until 2024, when there were 971 of them, including 112 that resulted in injury or death. The transformation of Luigi Mangione into a folk hero represents more than just misguided sympathy for a troubled young man. It reflects a broader breakdown in America's capacity for constructive political engagement. In a system where legitimate grievances about healthcare costs and corporate power feel impossible to address through traditional democratic means, violence begins to appear as a reasonable alternative. This represents a fundamental failure of American institutions to respond to citizen concerns before they metastasize into vigilante justice. The case also highlights the dangerous intersection of social media culture with political violence. Mangione's story spread not through traditional news outlets, but through viral content, memes, and merchandise that stripped away the horror of his actions and replaced it with revolutionary romanticism. The speed with which his image was transformed into religious iconography and commercial products demonstrates how quickly modern media can mythologize violence and create martyrs from murderers. Perhaps most troubling is how Mangione's story fits into what some observers are calling the Trump-era death wish, a period in American history characterized by an increasing acceptance of political violence as a legitimate tool for social change. The assassination occurred in the immediate aftermath of another high-profile political killing, suggesting a pattern of young men from middle-class backgrounds turning to murder as a form of political expression. This trend represents a fundamental threat to democratic governance. When citizens lose faith in the ability of democratic institutions to address their grievances, they may turn to increasingly extreme measures. The lionization of Luigi Mangione sends a message that targeted assassination is not only acceptable, but heroic when directed at the right targets. This logic, once established, becomes impossible to contain, as different groups will inevitably have different ideas about who deserves to die for their role in various social problems. The international dimension of Mangione's appeal is equally concerning. Young people in countries with functioning healthcare systems have expressed sympathy for his cause, suggesting that the story has transcended its specific American context to become a symbol of resistance against perceived corporate oppression more generally. This global resonance indicates that the problems underlying Mangione's radicalization, growing inequality, corporate power, and institutional unresponsiveness, are not uniquely American phenomena. As America grapples with the implications of the Mangione case, fundamental questions about violence, justice, and social change demand answers. The healthcare system that drove Mangione to desperation remains largely unchanged. The grievances he articulated continue to affect millions of Americans, and the institutional mechanisms for addressing these problems appear as inadequate as ever. Meanwhile, his transformation into a folk hero suggests that significant numbers of Americans, particularly young people, are prepared to embrace violence as a legitimate response to systemic injustice. The Luigi Mangione case thus represents more than just another tragic shooting. It's a warning sign about the direction of American political culture. When murder becomes mythologized, when killers become folk heroes, and when violence is celebrated as effectiveness, a society has lost its moral compass. The question facing America is not whether Luigi Mangione was right to kill Brian Thompson. He wasn't, but whether American institutions can address the legitimate grievances that made so many people willing to celebrate his actions. If a broken healthcare system can turn a middle-class college graduate into a folk hero assassin, celebrated by nearly half of America's young people, what does this say about the country's capacity to resolve its deepest social problems through democratic means rather than vigilante violence?